cultures and traditions are what are, they're the guide when you're developing your governing structure, so that the governing structure doesn't necessarily have to abide by someone else's description of what a government is. You know, whether, say for example, in choosing the people who the speakers for the people, in choosing them, right now there's this idea that the one person, one vote is the way that you reach democracy, and that's not necessarily a cultural match for many of our people. And what we really need is we need to structure our governance in ways that match who we are as a people, and so that, because then they end up being meaningful.
The chief and council system through the Indian Act is a new institution, a new structure for governing in a community. That whole structure, more based on sort of municipal style government. Also, and not at all connected to most Indigenous cultures. None, if I might even be so bold to say that. We have many modern structures too, and institutions, like a lot of our non-profit boards for education, we'll say, as an example. But even for-profit boards that we've set up for our economic development ventures and so on. Very different institutions that really have no cultural match. So I think, and I often talk about this in our programs, I think communities need to explore these modern structures and processes and really explore traditional forms of decision making, traditional forms of leadership, traditional forms of governance, and take the best of that and reconcile it with these modern forms of governance and decision making that we have.
In realistic terms, they're not totally understood by our people right now, because it's been eroded for so long. So there's a whole teaching about going back to how we do things culturally, what makes sense to us culturally. And when you start talking about what makes sense to a people culturally, then it starts to answer some of the other questions that come up in terms of how you form your government. It has to have a cultural match.
Now, I'm not saying that we necessarily have to take something from 500 years ago and try to use that in today's world. But there are often certain processes that could have worked, or it might even be a structure or a model, but quite often it's the philosophy or the values of how that ran that I think we can take to build as a foundation for our modern institutions. So it's a bit of a reconciliation of our institutions to implement the inherent right to self-government, and exploring the traditions and values that will ground that, to really make it feel like, yeah, this is truly something that's a cultural match. This is something our community can live with. This is something that can make us practice in a modern world and still be Cree, or whatever community you're from, Indigenous community you're from. I think it's that type of reconciliation.